This is Arnie Reisman. Welcome to the Virtual Poetry Cafe, brought to you by the Martha's Vineyard Playhouse. Here we are, between the holidays and a rock and a hard place, while we wait for millions of doses of a fabulous vaccine to take us all back to something approaching normal. We are comfortably here once again in Virtualville. If I look a little fuzzy, it's not you, it's me, or rather my aging laptop. This may be a sign it's time to leave this device left over from the French Impressionism period. Oh well, let's soldier on. Once again, we have three wonderful poets to read from their work: Rose Styron, Don McLagan, and Laura Roosevelt. These programs will be brief during this time of COVID. Please let any poetry lover know that all our Poetry Cafe programs for this season will be available throughout this winter at mvplayhouse.org. To start us off, here is Rose Styron. She will be reading from an early book of hers called Thieves' Afternoon, 2 poems, and also from her latest, Fierce Day. Rose?
This is a poem almost 50 years old from my first adult book of poems, The Scarlet Countryside. We are committed to language, we mutable birds, denying that the constant cardinal's songs reveal that image is illusion, loyalty will, desire a real. We are committed to images, cruces of words, in the presence of witnesses. Our intent conceal. We are committed to loyalty, especially where reason and other juries find it absurd. From the soul's sentence, there is no appeal. And lately, committed to desire that spins us higher than ever we meant into the pure air, where sense is blurred and after a space leaves us to fall free and heal. I would commit the scarlet countryside to song, to leaving us, we two, unheard. Language and the flight from it, our Catherine wheel. Second poem, also from that book, is Election Day, which seemed appropriate for right now. Light loss. The willow bends, still green in November, and raspberry vines bear incredible sweetness under the leaves of frost. Choices of some sense abound outside the poles. Fresh incense from autumn fires, sheared hills, soft openings in old stone walls, the numberless gold sheaves of promise. Dark rivers wind down to the open harbor. Our fathers found curious freedom in choosing New England. And this is from my latest book. It turns out to be the title poem, Fierce Day. Toward daybreak. All night, all crowded alien night, it seems I wait for sunrise's rescue. The band of coral light, heralding, touching the dark windows on my sea. The black crows flying up against the slate blue suddenly, and the 14 black-white ducks, almost a valentine, lining the frilly edge of tide. Shell hearts along the curve of sand. At last, the sun, brilliant as full moon summer's eve, far to the right now, behind the bare chandelier of our tree, upside down, as my world without you. Gone into 1,000 early mornings that stretch across thick-tiered horizons here, clotted gray-blue, only a pencil rim of yellow light beneath. I wait impatiently for the sun's reappearance high above this window in the white-blue paper sky, holding up the land, the far side of the harbor, the white slant gulls, white paper desk. Day again, more day, fierce day.
Thank you so much, Rose. Next, we go to Florida for Don McLagan with some underpinnings of a holiday theme. Don, take it away.
Thanks, Arnie. Yes, I'm Don McLagan, and today I'm reading to you from Sarasota, Florida. Barbara, my wife, and I migrate south to avoid the snow and cold of New England. But that creates an unfamiliar hue to December. That's what the first poem is about, Christmas in December. It's not Currier and Ives here. The set sun silhouettes palms and fishermen with their evening nets. The reflection of Christmas sprinkles warm on the bay. No doubt local kids find nothing amiss and nestle all snug in their beds. But gathering on the aft deck of a boat moored at Marina Jack, the night feels askew. Colored lights seem gaudy on palm trees, holly out of place on lanais. Here, snowy is just an adjective for egret. Tonight, snow, sleighs, and Yule logs are distant. But on this holiday, untethered by place, the bustle of Zoom, your friendly calls, and good smells from the kitchen are welcome in our Sarasota home. This year, the solstice is on December 21st. Physics tells us the Earth is a wobbly place, tilting right and tilting left. This year has been a particularly wobbly year. This next poem is called Solstice, Winter Solstice 2020. Like a gray wave flooding ashore, winter spills over the solstice. Holiday lights brighten the door, but greet no family. Virus swirls, ballots churn, and justice skitters like a candy wrapper blown across the beach. Unfelt, the great tilt of Earth reverses. Daylight begins its nursling suckle on the sun. Underground, seeds prepare to swell and root. We know this flood will ebb. Not yet, though. And we have endured for so very long. I'd like to conclude on a friendly note, like those seasonal cards in your mailbox. The holiday letter. Camouflaged in holiday cards come missives from the annual bards. They bring us news and sometimes views that may amuse, amaze, confuse the unsuspecting mailbox getter, reader of the holiday letter. Often pictures, mostly prose. How do they choose what they expose? The births and dogs and college choices, sports awards, cherubic voices. Kids are perfect, health is great. One has found an ideal mate. They've traveled to some scenic dell, or sometimes had the trip from hell. New grandparents who boast out loud that reproduction makes them proud. It's not all joy. Sometimes there's doubting, true confessions subtle outing. She's been hurt and he's addicted, painful cries of souls conflicted. Death of hamsters, flushed goldfishes, mixed in with the holiday wishes. These letters, yearly rites of pen, are Facebook for the older gen. Yet, I confess I love this craft of telling stories quaint and daft. It makes me happy. And here's the reason. I love to hear from you each season. Thank you for this opportunity to share poems with you. Arnie?
And thank you, Don. I can relate to the letters, jeez. Now, let's hear from Laura Roosevelt with some thoughts about this pandemic and about family. Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura Roosevelt, and actually I decided not to read the poem about family. I am instead reading 3 poems, all of which are recent and hence have all been written during the pandemic. Some are related to it more obviously than others. The first is called Safari, and it is about the last trip that my husband took before we weren't allowed to travel anymore. Oh, I see you've got my cat in the background. Well, no matter. Anyway, it's called Safari. Amboseli to Nairobi, 1 lane each way. Midday traffic crawls up a hill, stuck behind a sputtering truck. Barefoot Maasai herd goats by the road. In towns, people walk between the bottled water and fruit. After 6 hours in a Jeep, Kenyatta's lines and muggy lobbies, 2 long flights, a 90-minute drive, and a steamship ride across the Sound, we hail a cab to home. That was February. The virus was in China, not yet hijacking our minds, our lives. How rapidly our orbits contracted. Our cars were garage. Nearest neighbors live beyond a chasm we can't cross. Sequestered, we subsist in an in-between, glued to the news, then avoiding it, finding small meaning in closet purges and basement cleaning, then dumbfounds us all by arriving as always. It can't be ignored. So I try Safari out my door. Look, by the drive, 2 deer starved by a winter shorthorns assert that despite everything, life persists. A hawk, perched on an overhead branch, surveys a sky in which birds fly. Maybe disease is nature's recompense for human abuse. We must learn from the trees that nurture their sick, the creatures who eat no more than they need. At night, 2 shells wail across the air, a cry like pain or a soulful greeting. The evening has come. I am here in the dark, as are you. Second poem I'm going to read is A Poet Contemplates a Memoir. And it's a poem that I wrote because I've been thinking for at least 20 years about writing a memoir about a specific segment of my life and haven't done it. So I finally thought, I guess I'll write a poem about not doing it. And after I wrote the poem, I started doing it. So I kind of like this poem. So A Poet Contemplates a Memoir. Poems go for the quick KO, jabbing with Limoges. A memoir, though compressed to girl turns grit into pearls, must still fight all 12. Do I have such stamina? Books want prose that's loose enough to lose themselves in, while poets grip pens and write words as with gold. Memoirists need supple wrists and a sense of limitless ink. But my story is urging itself toward my fingertips, pleading for a sheaf of empty pages. It whispers, sit, Be the Buddha who embodies the mantra that belongs alone to you. Open your mouth and exhale your tail in a long, deliberate breath. And finally, I was thinking about, what are we gonna remember after this pandemic is over, years and years from now? What's gonna come back to us? Probably Zoom, but here are a few other things that might be remembered. What will be remembered? In 15 years, grating ginger for Indian butter chicken, I might recall that we rated it a 98. The homemade bagels we ate hot from the oven, and the multiple batches of sunflower sesame almond crunch that never lasted longer than a day. Eating well seemed the best revenge, feeding ourselves for an iffy future, savoring the tastes of our pasts. We read widely, stretched often, flexibility of mind and body seeming essential to survival. In the kitchen, spindly seedlings for the summer's garden sprouted in trays by the glass door where the sun shone in and warmed the floor, even when it was cold outside and gloomed just beyond the driveway. We made a point of turning the compost, picking daffodils and forsythia in the woods where moss was greening, leaf buds swelling, ferns unfurling. There, undeniably, life as we knew it was renewing itself against all odds. Thanks.
And thank you, Laura. Thanks very much to all of you, Rose, Don, Laura. Please stay safe. To conclude this poem, I'd like to read 3 of mine, poems that have nothing to do with the holidays or winter solstice or even the coronavirus. Although there's nothing but happiness in our house, my wife and I have become familiar with too many who have had relationships that are unfortunately on a par with Ahab's pursuit of Moby Dick. So to those in need, I dedicate these 3 poems. The first 2 are from my last book, Lightheaded in the Dark Ages, and the third one is a newer one. The first one is called If by If. He scratched at love, rebounded, scratched again, taking himself apart, if by if, reaching for conclusions before they reach for him, lips parched from deserts longing, legends parted by dragons beneath, homeless in his own architecture, another truth separated from the hurt. Sometimes calls it God or fate, sometimes calls it witchcraft. Prayers delivered to the odds makers. He drives, is driven, thumbs for a ride, like a soft day that surrenders to the first evening that comes along. We all scratch at sometime, fingers scraping at ledges and eaves, trying to hold on to what we've built, not fall graceless into a deep meanwhile. The next poem is called Not to Be. It was not meant to be, if you believe in fate. It was not going to be, if you believe in chemistry. She raised poodles. He raised hell. He grew orchids. She grew weary. She was willing to admit defeat. He was defeated to admit he was willing. It was not built to last if you believe in sustainable architecture. You could see the stress of separation along the handmade seams coming to Jesus and apart. She saw them and began to pull. In panic, he pulled back. Wrapped up in himself, she made him whole. She saw the forest and heard cries of timber. He saw the forest. He never saw the forest, only the trees. All cries were blotted out by the sounds of the sun. He thought the world of her. She thought the world as all the places she hadn't seen. He thought he took her for what she was. He left nothing to the imagination. In the end, when she left with nothing, but took everything. And the last poem is called How It Went. And all you need to know for this last one is that Fanny Braun was the love of John Keats's short life, and Maud Gonne dazzled the likes of William Butler Yeats. Again, the poem's title is How It Went. Whenever winds seemed to waver, they moved like kites. She saw herself as Fanny Braun to his sickly, sensual Keats. All that was available about her was the light coming from within. Each stormless night, a probing moon shone through a shadow of a man. A hand, the one not holding the glass of delusion, pulled a calculated curtain across a pleaded conversation. The difference between compassion and obsession is the location of the wound. What the human eye can see and burn is one iota of it all. One Grecian urn in a sea of porcelain. Silence corrected a course unsound. Once more off to Byzantium, they moved like yachts. To him, she'd always be Maud Gonne, to his prickly, sensible Yeats. Well, there you have it. So ends our second virtual Poetry Cafe. See you next month. On Wednesday, January 6th, we will have Ellen Story, Peter Letterman, and all the way from the United Kingdom, Richard Wace. Until then, stay safe and masked, and thanks again for joining us.